Greetings, students. I'm Dr. Holly Wilson, and I'm going to be your instructor for this Introduction to Philosophy class. I want to let you know a little bit about myself, and I would like to also know a little bit more about you. So I'm going to be asking you to introduce yourself too. I have a master's degree and a PhD in philosophy from Penn State University, and I have a master's degree in theology from Loyola University in New Orleans. And I chose to study philosophy because I was taking a course in psychology, actually. And there I was studying a psychologist named Lawrence Kohlberg, who was doing research on the question of moral judgment. And I became very curious about moral judgment, and I wanted to take an ethics class in philosophy to know more about ethics and moral judgment. And so I took this ethics class, and I was introduced to a philosopher named Immanuel Kant, who wrote a wonderful ethics that I fell in love with. And as I got to know my philosophy professors better, there was one professor who really stood out in my mind. He was an excellent teacher. He really cared about his students. And when I wrote my senior thesis with him, he was really good and helpful toward me. And so I decided to become a philosophy professor, just like him. So I went to graduate school in philosophy instead of psychology. Now, when I was in my 20s, I traveled a lot, and I traveled around Europe twice, and then I lived in Japan for a year, and after that, I lived in Germany for 3 years while I was writing my dissertation on Immanuel Kant. Imagine that. But I want to tell you a couple stories from that period in my life because they're funny stories and interesting stories. One of them was about the time I was in Japan, and I was teaching English at Texas Instruments. And one of the engineers came to me one day, and he said that this word was the most important word at Texas Instruments. And he said it was integrity. And I was curious about that because I had never heard this word before. And I thought it had something to do with maybe integrated circuits. So I asked him to show me the word, and he went and got this beautiful plaque, and in the middle of the plaque was the word integrity. and I laughed because I had already discovered that when Japanese studied English from Japanese teachers, they didn't learn how to pronounce English correctly. So I was always having to correct their pronunciation. So that was one interesting story from my time in Japan. And I wanted to tell you another interesting story from my time in Germany and why I decided to make German my second language. I was traveling through Europe, and I bought a bicycle in Italy. Italians were known for making good bicycles. And I took the bicycle up to Germany, to the Black Forest region, which was a little bit mountainous. And my goal was to reach Triberg, Germany, and view the Cuckoo Clock Museum. And I made it there, and I spent the night on a park bench, and woke up the next morning and discovered very unhappily that I had re-injured my ligament in my left leg, my left knee, and I knew that I couldn't ride any further. And so I was really disappointed and depressed, and I was just sitting on that bench trying to figure out what to do when I heard a man behind me yelling, "Cafe, cafe!" And I turned around, and this man was motioning to me, "Cafe, cafe!" So I went with him after I packed up my things, and he took me up to his apartment and introduced me to his wife and his son. And his son spoke English to me because I didn't know any German. And I told them about myself, and they told me about themselves. And Then I told them, and they gave me breakfast and coffee. And then I told them about my predicament, and they said, no problem. They said the road behind our house goes all the way downhill, all the way back to Basel, Germany, where I had left my backpack and where I had started my journey. So I was totally delighted, and I went off to see the Cuckoo Factory, and made my way back to Basel, and then my way back to the United States. And I just thought that these people were so nice to me, and they saved me, and so I was going to learn their language, and I did. Um, Now, today I don't travel as much as I used to, but every year my family gets together for a reunion in Ohio. Just my nuclear family, my brother and my sister, my mother, and my nieces and nephew. And then I do travel up to Milwaukee to visit my mother, maybe several times a year. But I do like to go for walks at Black Bayou National Wildlife Refuge here in Monroe, Louisiana. I live here in Monroe. And I love to watch wildlife. And I like to then write vignettes, funny kind of vignettes about him. And then I also have two dogs. One is named Sassy, is a Shih Tzu, and you could probably hear her whining in the background. And then I have a Chihuahua named Schatzi, which means treasure in German. And then I have a gray cat named Java, who likes to sit on my lap when I'm studying and have my laptop on my lap. Somehow he makes room for himself. And then I have another job, and which keeps me in Monroe, and that is I go out to area prisons and teach prisoners uh, philosophy, theology, and Bible studies. And that's a very rewarding work for me because the prisoners really appreciate it. Um, I think you're going to like philosophy a lot because we're going to be talking about really interesting topics, and there's going to be a lot of controversy and a lot of different points of view, and you're going to be able to express your points of view, and I'm going to teach you how to defend your position and give sound and valid arguments, and teach you also about what other philosophers think about these issues. And now, when I talk about arguments, I do not mean people getting angry at each other. I mean people defending their position. So I would like you now to go ahead and take the initiative and introduce yourself and tell us some interesting stories about yourself.